Let's go over the waiver wire. Who has been added and dropped? Are they the right moves? Who should you add and drop? Which are the players that are causing a bit of a buzz? Michael Bolton, he knows all about buzzing.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and yes, I have been down to the southern part of the Gulf when the Bonita run. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Blue Sky, joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Also, go to lockedondaily.com. We've got newsletters. Your favorite NBA team has a newsletter. All the info you need is there. Sign up. It's free 5 days a week. Also, all of you double bangers, it's great to have you guys here. We head into the stretch run of the NBA season. Not long to go of the actual regular season before we head into the playoffs. Even less time until fantasy playoffs. For some of you, it'll be 1 week to go. For some of you, you've already started. But we are getting there. We are almost at the end of the fantasy line. Just while everyone is still around and watching, hey, this show goes all through the year. We do so much stuff in the off-season as well. I know a lot of you just won't watch, but a lot of it is there's some fantasy-related stuff and there's real-life-related stuff, and it all sort of merges together. We do reviews and draft stuff and free agency stuff all through the season. So yeah, it is going to be, as the kids might say, I don't know, lit, maybe, possibly, potentially, I guess, sort of. Let's talk waiver wire. It is National Tortilla Chips Day. So get your tortillas out, get some dip on them, eat them. That's enough time to let the rage subside. I know that they're called tortilla, but I just wanted to say something that was dumb. Let's go and talk about the fantasy basketball waiver wire. Let's look at the most added players. 6 guys over the last 48 hours on Basketball Monster that have been added the most across fantasy leagues. And the number one player on this list is, it's in the aftermath of the Victor Wembanyama injury, it is the horse, Keldon Johnson. I've been telling people that this guy has been over-rostered all season. The reason I've been telling people that is because it's true. He's been terrible all season, yet still held on to in so many different leagues. He's sitting at 40% rostered on Basketball Monster, 21% for Yahoo, and that number has been too high. The numbers you see, the stats up on the screen, are for the last 2 calendar weeks of action. So it's basically the last 4 or 5 days post All-Star break plus 4 or 5 of them pre-All-Star break. And Keldon in that time is the 242nd ranked player. He's averaging under 20 fantasy points per game. But of course, the last time we saw the Spurs and Keldon Johnson play, he scored, 25 points on 84% shooting? So everyone said, there we go. We are on here. This guy is going to take every shot without Wemby, and he's going to be great. And he won't. He won't. But he will be better, because there'll be more opportunity to take shots. There'll be more opportunity to get minutes. And there's only one thing that makes Keldon Johnson valuable for fantasy, and it's taking a lot of shots. So look, those numbers there, 13, 3, and 3, with not a single steal or block, by the way, over that time frame, in 21 minutes a night, is useless. It's completely useless. But that usage number and those minutes are going to rise. To me, he at least, I won't say at the very least, I'd say at the very most, actually, he moves into the, hey, now you are in the streaming area for at least for 12-team leagues when I'm looking for scoring. Last game, they got cooked by the Pistons. A lot of the bench guys got all their minutes dropped. Or the starters got their minutes dropped way down. Johnson couldn't miss a shot, and his minutes went way up. He might be a guy that averages 16 points. He might. But he might go 16, 3, and 1 with no steals, no blocks, and average percentages, or below average percentages. And that's not that useful for everybody. So just be very cautious. There is a lot of chasing in people that have gone and added him based on this. We take chances on things all the time. And the Spurs have this really good schedule this week as well, including the only team with the weekend back-to-back. But that doesn't mean that this is an absolute grab, lock-in. He is the guy. And given that he's the most added player, maybe he's going to come out and have a 30-point triple-double in Sunday's game, and I look completely stupid. Possible. I've done that before. I've looked stupid. But I have seen Keldon Johnson play for year upon year upon year upon year upon year. and he's the same dude. Nothing changes. So while there is more opportunity, there are more shots, he doesn't always take advantage of that. He remains a bench player, and he's going to need to shoot unbelievable percentages to be useful for you. The other names on the most added list. Number 2 is Royce O'Neal. We saw the Royce O'Neal situation. One game, absolutely ridiculous. The next game, what do you have, 3 points in 24 minutes? He's absolutely not a must-roster player. But when the Suns have a positive schedule, him and Grayson Allen, these sort of guys, less so Bol, less so Tyus Jones, who's a drop, you can look at these guys as potential stream options, but absolutely not must-roster players. The next guy on that list is Cole Anthony, and while Jalen Suggs is out, I like taking that chance on him. I had him on the cover of the Sunday stream show. Of course, that means he plays 17 minutes and has 2 of 9 shooting for 6 points. I know that's probably likely, and they go with Mr. Black instead, but that doesn't mean that will happen, because Anthony's been great post-break. It's baffling that they buried him on the depth chart all season, but at the moment, while Suggs is out, I actually do like that one. I don't like his teammate Wendell Carter Jr. outside of, hey, I am streaming for rebounds today. And he was on my streaming show for Sunday, and we talked about how Wendell Carter is a really good rebound streamer. But that's it. We're not looking at that as a long-term ad. The next one is Day'Ron Sharpe, and he is a curious case, isn't he, Day'Ron? Because he's basically putting up top 110 numbers in 17 minutes a night. And I don't know what the Nets are doing. I have no idea. Their minutes, and it's a bit like the Jazz, who are also completely confusing, that we get games where the starters play 24 minutes for Brooklyn and they're trying to lose and it looks like they're giving away players, and then they go hard and play 35 minutes and they all cook, and Nick Claxton's now turned into a good player again after 3 months of being terrible. So if Claxton ever gets shut down or doesn't play, then Sharpe's going to blow up. But there is, and this is a disconnection I think sometimes we have in the fantasy spaces. We talk about, and I'm guilty of it too, we talk about, man, I can't believe these teams aren't tanking and they're trying. Yet, on the other hand, we might talk out the other side of our face and say, oh my God, the NBA, or every team is just tanking and not trying to win. Obviously, both of those things can't be true. If we are lambasting teams for not developing younger players and trying to put their best lineup out to win every game, then they obviously can't be tanking at the same time. And when we get to this stage where there's 6-7 weeks left in the season and teams aren't prioritizing development of young guys, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense for the future. But we also then can't come out and say every team tanks and no one wants to try in the NBA, because they're obviously doing that to their own detriment at times, but they are obviously trying to win. And that's going to make it hard for these teams like Brooklyn, who are just keep winning and keep doing stuff. And Utah. It's going to make it hard to figure that out. Now, as for Day'Ron, back to that point, bro's actually putting up numbers in the limited minutes he's playing. If at any point there is something that happens to Claxton, maybe that might not ever happen. And honestly, we're getting to the stage with Brooklyn where I don't think that we look at them, because I think they've won too many games to even get down low enough. I don't know that we look at them as a team that's going to necessarily sit players down for draft pick purposes. Now, the reason they could do it is injury prevention and to see what their young guys do, which I still think will happen, but it might not be the final 4 weeks. It might be the final 2 weeks. So we need to be aware of that. The last name there is Yves Missi. Why? I get it. Like, I get a stream on Sunday. Missi's done nothing of late at all. What has Missi's best case scenario been this season? The 100th best player best case? I don't know. I feel like he has been absolutely frothed to the gills because of flawed fantasy ranks. He is a limited minutes center who occasionally gets rebounds and blocks and doesn't really do much else. And that is useful. And we need to be very, very focused and mindful on the things that we need for our teams at this point of the year. But yeah, I wouldn't be looking at Missi as a, man, I can't believe somebody dropped him, we've got to go grab him sort of a player. Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready, because if they swoosh, maybe not Yves Missi, but you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. So whenever a player in the NBA scores 50, during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. So you might be watching Yves Missi and the Pelicans, and Trey Murphy's on the way to 50. And you go, get out of the way, Missi. Just give it to Trey. I want the 50 because I want my discounted pizza the next day. I want to get my burgers when CJ McCollum drops a 50-point game, but of course that includes 7 of 30 from the free throw line along with 8 blocks, because that's what CJ does. Whatever it is, sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders of participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. I always, when I get to the end of reading about DoorDash, where it goes to learn more, I always think there's something more for me to come in that. Don't know about that phrasing. There's always something extra that I've got to say, but then that's it. That's just the end of the. That's just the end of the ad. We're here talking about the waiver wire. We're here talking about players who have been added, and we went into some long discussions on some of those guys, which I think was necessary. Let's talk about the most added players over on Yahoo. Over the last, or less than 24 hours is the time frame they use. Number one player there, again, I don't like to double up the names, but no, Chris Dunn is there, and Dunny has been putting up some very big numbers. It's on the back of insane steal numbers, but he's getting good assists as well. I think he's totally reasonable, and I was very close, spoiler alert, to talking about in the must roster section, which I'm going to be cutting those sort of sections back a little bit because everything becomes more specific, and me providing very rigid guidelines for teams at this point, I think is bad, and it leads to more mistakes than it leads to good. But anyway, I almost had Chris Dunn on that list. I'm not quite there because I don't know that, well, I do know that steals at that level cannot hold. But if he's a 30-minute a night player, which he has been, then we're in. We love that. That's unbelievably good. And he is rolling at that role at the moment. The next most added player is Moses Moody, who's a player that I have been irrationally into over years, and it's just never happened. He hasn't always had, and still doesn't really, honestly, have a particularly strong fantasy game. But he is starting. And I don't know what happens when Kuminga is out. We don't have to worry about that for the next, or when Kuminga is back. Kuminga's out for at least the next two games. Does Podziemski start? Does Moody start? Moody's like a shooting guard who shoots well, but also can defend pretty well and pass okay, but can play the 4 and can play the 2. He's just incredibly versatile. I don't know that he's got these huge boosts in his game that can come. He's okay to roster for now, absolutely, especially with some scoring bump and some threes. I like what that brings. Long term, I don't really see it. There is a chance, I guess, that he starts over Podziemski. I don't think he will, but we will find out. And I like what he's doing. The next player on the most added list is Toumani Camara, who I'll tell you right now, I have not been, big on Toumani going, hey, this guy is a future star. I can't believe what he's doing. It's like, hey, he's a really low usage guy who's putting up some real hot streaks. And I think that for the majority of the season, that has been accurate. His minutes have been secure all season, relatively secure, but there was a period where he'd go down to 29 and he'd roll at like 10 usage, and if the shot wasn't falling, he'd do absolutely nothing. Recently, this man is on an unbelievable hot streak. Now, I will say this is not going to stick. There is zero chance that he holds at this level. Toumani Camara, over the last 2 weeks, is the 32nd ranked player. He's 56th in Yahoo points leagues, averaging 36 fantasy points. He's still only at 14% usage, and he's at 39% rostered on Yahoo. Basketball Monster members and those leagues, he's rostered in every space, but that's not everybody, clearly. But what he is doing at the moment, he's shooting 59% from the field. He hasn't missed a free throw. He's at 55% from 3. He's averaging 2.3 steals and 1.5 blocks with 14, 6, and 3. What he is doing has been ridiculously good. There is going to be a sharp drop. I assure you there is going to be an incredibly sharp drop because steals, blocks, 3-point percentage, and even 2-point percentage, all being at well above any reasonable level at the moment, they could all come down all at once. And then that makes him the 170th best player. So, yeah, he is cooking at the moment. I actually didn't think he had this level of play in him. I think the way I viewed Toumani Camara is he is a very, very, very good role player. Maybe there's more in there. I don't think there is. I would be a little worried. I'd be a little worried that it's post-Durant, Mikal Bridges. But he's not even doing it with usage. He just can't miss any shots. And then he's generating gigantic defensive. It's a little Herb Jonesy, to be honest. But he's been great. And yeah, we have to roster him now. I would be fearful. I would be fearful of any of those things. 2-pointers, 3-pointers, free throws, steals, blocks, all crashing. And if they all crash at once, you're left with a husk of a player. And even if they do crash, it doesn't mean he turns into a bad player. It's just the natural variance of some of these numbers. But holding at that level seems like it'd be pretty difficult. The next most added player on Yahoo is Brandon Pajemski, who not really blowing us away. He's probably more of a stream pool TMC sort of a guy. If you don't know what TMC is, it's the group of players who sit between like 120 and 170, where Ben Mathurin lives. That's what TMC, the Mathurin Collective. All these group of guys where you go, I probably should roster him. And then 40 other players come up that look the same. So in essence, if you stream that spot and get 6 to 7 games out of players from TMC, well, you're going to do better than just holding on to one of them. And I think that's sort of where Moody fits. And I think that's where I had Kamara in the past. I think he's probably pushed past that at the moment. But I think Pajemski's in that area as well. Warriors play today, so it makes sense that Pajemski and Moody have been added. That I would do that as well. And then we can reassess it when Kuminga returns. Corey Kispert, one of the most added players. We know what this man is. He's points and threes. And in a game where Chris Middleton is out, which is Sunday, it does give extra opportunity. Now, Kispert is the March legend. Every year, the man does nothing. And then we get to March and certain players are out and he comes out and he averages 26 points and he shoots 55%. He hits 6 threes a game and then everyone's going, man, they've got Corey Kispert. What a great player. Can't wait for Corey Kispert to do something. And then the next season he comes in, he's their 7th man again for the 4th consecutive year. But we're in March almost. So maybe this is Kispert time. Probably not. He is probably part of TMC. He's probably in that grouping of guys that we can look at for points and threes, but bro doesn't do anything else. So don't worry too much about it. The next most added player is Zach Ricochet. And the Hawks just don't play him enough. He has been dreadful for most of the season from a shooting perspective. But recently he's been fine, like average. He doesn't get enough minutes, which is unfortunate. He doesn't get enough usage, which is unfortunate. I don't mind looking at Ricochet and saying, okay, I'll use him to stream, but also I think there's a little turn up area coming. I don't know how accurate I feel about that. But I can see that there is just something sort of percolating with the consistent improvement in production from him. If we have a look now at the 6 most dropped players on Basketball Monster over the last 48 hours. Number 1 is Bol. We said this. We've said it so many times. You've said it. I've said it. Many people have said it about Bol. That, hey, he got a chance to start and Budenholzer dropped to Steve Kerr and I said, yeah, foreseeable future. We'll do this. And we go, okay, you've got to do it. Because if this man plays 28 minutes a night, it's a top 50 player. But be aware that every time that he plays, in Denver, in Orlando, in failed trades to Detroit, in Phoenix, wherever he is, he goes out there and he plays and then he has his big game and then the coach wants to go, what are you doing? Can you stop doing that? Why are you out of position on both ends of the court? How do you not know where to be at any point in any game? And then they go, nah, we're actually good with that. Bol, go sit down, my guy. It happens, it's like clockwork every single time. You always got to take, because if he plays 28 and if he figures it out, or not even if he figures it out, if the coach doesn't figure out that he's being bad out there, then you've got great fantasy value. But the coach has figured it out. He's back on the bench. You move on easily. Bobby Portis, they don't need to go into that one. Droppable. Yep, not going to play. He's out, 23 more games, I think? Done. Gershon Yabusele, interesting name to drop. I didn't think people would drop him. Because Embiid, honestly, I believe that every morning that I wake up, that I'm going to see a Shams notification that says Joel Embiid has decided to undergo meniscus surgery again in efforts to be ready for the beginning of next season. I'm waiting for it. But I'll also say this, that even when Embiid is out, it's a 50-50 proposition whether Gershon's going to be useful or not. And when Embiid plays, he's not useful, at all. So I get completely not holding on to him. There's more chance of him being useful if Embiid does have surgery, and they are so bad at the moment, the Sixers, that I can see this happening. But yeah, he is not really producing. The 4th most dropped player is Matas Buzelis. We thought, idiotically, that the Bulls might go, well, we're starting our rookie. We barely play him all season. We made a move and traded away Zach LaVine. Are we trying to develop some young guys? That's sort of what it looked like from the outside, but I guess not. Because Buzelis just continues to be disappointing in terms of minutes. Now, last game wasn't terrible, but they're not going here his 33, 34 minutes, even with Patrick Williams out, even with Ayo Dosunmu out. I think that we're going to have plenty of opportunities to use Buzelis all season, but it's going to be like so many rookies, especially bad rookies, like this whole class. It's going to be frustrating to try and hold on to him. So I get that. The next most dropped player. We're going over to Washington because Carlton Carrington is one of the most dropped players. And I get it. I do get it. Carrington has been elevated to the starting position in Washington about 3 times already this season. And every time an old crusty-ass veteran comes in and takes the spot away. It was Malcolm Brogdon, I think, twice, and now it's Chris Middleton. Over the last 2 weeks, where everyone was going and grabbing Carrington, because the numbers were okay, he averaged 26 fantasy points in 32 minutes with only 16 usage. He was 113th in category leagues. He averaged 12, 5, and 4 with a steal on 46%. But if we're not going to get 32 minutes every night, and it doesn't look like we are, how can you do it? Because like best case scenario, we thought this, or Kuzma's traded, the usage will go up. Nah, not really. Okay, now Middleton's there, so it's going to be like back and forward with him and Smart, and what they do with Brogdon, I've got no idea. I think Carrington, again, is fine to look at. He's fine to use. He's fine to consider. But the things that you wanted, the things that you waited for, well, Kuzma's gone, usage is going to go up. Not really. He sort of was the same marginally passive player. So dropping him makes sense. There's a huge chance today that Middleton being out, he goes back to start again and then get benched the next game, of course. And he could have a huge game. He could have a big performance. He could shock us and have a 23 usage game. But it's been a very consistent thing from Carrington all season, where he's just completely passive offensively. I like him still a lot, but I don't really think that we have to just lock ourselves in on him. We can. I don't mind it. Again, another one of these teams that I don't know what they're doing. Are you trying to develop the young guys? Are you trying to scrounge out wins with veterans who have no business being on your team? Should I get angry that you're trying to win games? I don't know. But that's sort of where I am with them. So Carrington's very debatable. I get dropping him. And this man is on the most dropped list every week. It's Dillon Brooks. He's just always here because that's the sort of nature of who the player is. He's a guy that you use when the Rockets play, especially when there's a back-to-back. He can have absolute stinkers, and then you move on. You have no business holding on to him all the way through. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And with FanDuel, you can place live bets all throughout the game. So even if you miss the start of the game, that doesn't mean that you can be eliminated from placing your bets or getting your thoughts in on an NBA game. You can do live lines and live totals and straight up stuff and see a comeback appearing in whatever you want to do. You can actually combine these as well into live same-game parlays to increase your return. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, let's go into the most dropped list over on Yahoo, and some names here which definitely need discussion. The first name on this list is Jackson Hayes. What I noticed on the Yahoo most dropped list is people are incredibly reactive. There's no problem with dropping Jackson Hayes. Like, he's not a must roster player at all. He's fine to use, but last game he didn't do very much, so he got dropped. And I do get that. Again, streaming is very important. But we do get some reactive things. And the Jackson Hayes one, whatever. The next one is where I go, okay, you really dropped Donovan Clingan? I will be the first to tell you, and I've told you many times, sometimes to the aggressive replies from people, that I don't believe, currently right now, at this point, in early 2025, I don't believe that Donovan Clingan's a good player. Me saying that someone is not a good player does not mean that I think they are a bad player. Those two things, they are not the only two options. You can be a fine player, an average player, a below average player, a passable player. But if you're not good, and he's not good, he might become good. I'm not convinced he ever becomes great. He might become good. But also, like, if I added Don Clingan, and I think I did in one league, Ayton's not returning, I would be holding him. Yeah, the last two games have been bad. One game he was outplayed by Rob Williams. The other game he was outplayed by Jabari Walker. Again, he is currently not good. And the team is trying to win. Now, you can debate whether that's the right move or not, but that's just the common theme with everything we've spoken about. And when I talk about shutdowns so much, I say we overreact to them all the time. The way that I set my fantasy leagues up is so that it ends around March 23rd, because the majority of these shutdowns happen after that date. People start panicking about it from January the 1st, from Christmas, from All-Star, where at this point of the season, this does not happen. You might get it happening later. It does not happen usually around this time. Yes? Now, as for Klingon, the last 2 weeks of play, he's 66th in category leagues and 92nd in points leagues, averaging 31 points, 13 and 10 with 2 blocks and 79% and 78 from the line in only 22 minutes. Now, unlike Jackson Hayes, who had a stinker last game, there's no way I am dropping Donovan Klingon at this point. No way. And I am, as you've heard, I am not a Donovan Klingon fan. I do not think that he is going to be this next game-changing center. I don't think he's going to be anything better long-term than like a top half, maybe top 15 NBA starting center. But that's okay. He doesn't have to be better than that. He's just sort of doing what he does. And his game is suited to fantasy success. Rebounds, field goals, blocks. It can all happen. So I don't get moving off of him after a couple of bad games. I think half of this stuff comes from what your expectations are. People had expectations, he's going to average 20 and 15, 3 blocks a game, league winner, top 20 player. And my expectation was like, no, not really. Like, he'll be fine. He'll be useful. He's very much not good at the moment. And there'll be times when he just can't succeed, or he can't play against certain opponents in certain situations, or he gets into foul trouble. So when he puts up these numbers, I go, yeah, okay, sort of what I wanted, yeah? Sort of what I expected. My expectations aren't through the roof for somebody like that. So I definitely would not have dropped Donovan Klingon. The next name on the list is Ayo Dosunmu. Dosunmu's dealing with a shoulder injury, and they're like, we don't know how long he's going to be out. No timetable to return. You know my thoughts on Ayo. He needs a couple of guys to be out. He needs a 36-minute-a-night role with an increased ball handling role, but with Giddey, White, Ball all still there. He doesn't get to do that. I have no problem dropping Ayo Dosunmu. I also have no problem dropping Moussa Diabate, who, again, people claim these things of our league winner. Diabate, not even the same as Klingon. He is not a good player. He might become a serviceable backup center for 2 years at some point in the league. All right? He's not a new player, Diabate. He has been in the NBA for a couple of years. He played on the Clippers. He's fine. But we tie ourselves into these ideas of these guys being great. And he's the third string center. Now, the games where Mark Williams does not play, Diabate did play more than Nurkic, and that's okay. It's okay to use him there. But if he's going to play 10 minutes in the other days, that's not... We need to maximize production for fantasy at this point of the year. And a guy that might play 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, not enough. Now, I will say this. The Hornets have got a really good schedule, especially starting this week. They're the only team with 3 games in 4 nights starting on Monday. So there's a back-to-back in there, obviously. So what you might get... You could honestly get 30 minutes from Diabate across 3 games. You could get 50 minutes from Diabate across 3 games. You might get 70 minutes. I don't know. I feel like there's at least one 28 to 30 minute game in there. Does he get 12 in the other 2? Does he get 0? I'm not sure. So I get dropping him, but also, like, it's a nice little period here. The next most dropped player is Lonzo Ball. I thought that Lonzo was able to, with getting 29 minutes a game, he would be a 12-team league guy. And the minutes were there. He is turning into it's one of the worst shooting stretches you'll ever see. What did he shoot, 11% last game? He can't hit a shot at all. And if he can't hit any shots, well, there's no point holding on. He's in TMC now. He's in the Matherin Collective. One of those just guys who will have some okay games. And for points leagues, I don't think you need to worry about it at all. It's a category league sort of spot. The other name there is Scoot Henderson, who I would try to hold. I think he's looked pretty good. Even in his limited bench role, I think he's doing enough. But I also get it. Like, there's no indication at this point that he's going to be 33 minutes a night starting every night at any point soon. So I get it if you don't want to hold on to him. I personally probably would have just held at this stage. But we talk about desperation. We talk about getting max games in. If he is your worst player, then you move on. And I don't think that's really a debatable thing. The must roster guys. This is just over the next couple of weeks I'm looking at it. These are just guys that I think if they're sitting on your waiver and they both are sitting under 30% rostered on Yahoo, that you just grab them and they would be probably too good to drop. Because that's what we want to look at. Who are your worst 2 to 3 players? Because it's very easy earlier in the season. This is a little strategy talk. It's easy earlier in the season to go, who's your worst player? That's the guy you can drop to stream through. Easy discussion, yes? We know that maybe who's your worst 2. When you get to fantasy playoffs, I think you need to be looking at who are my worst 3 to 4 players. And here is the reason why. Because what you want to do is in your group of your worst 3 to 4, maybe 5, but worst 4 players, which one of those worst 4 players plays the fewest quality games for the week? Because if your worst player plays on all 4 low volume days, and your third worst player plays on only one of those days, well, you know who's your worst player for that week? Your third worst guy who plays once, who will use once. Because we're getting, the way fantasy leagues are set up, you're about getting volume in. So, a must roster guy to me is someone who I don't see falling into that worst 3 players. I know you might argue with these 2 names, Jose Alvarado and Quentin Grimes, and it's okay if you want to argue whether they fit into that zone. And Alvarado did come off the bench last game for whatever reason that makes no sense in the world at all. But he still played 30 minutes. And Grimes is getting the 36-37, and there is a huge chance to me that Embiid's knee is just going to be done. I've been completely anti-Embiid from a fantasy perspective all season, and nothing is changing. So I think Grimes has actually got an ability to jump up from here. So Alvarado, I just think should be rostered. And again, I think Grimes should be too. I have been, again, put all my cards out here and disclose all my conflicts of interest. I'm not sure if always is the right term, but since he entered the NBA, I was like, I think there's something here in Quentin Grimes. I think he's got the ability to ramp up and down and handle the ball and defend and shoot and not really getting many opportunities. Over the last 2 weeks, he's the 70th ranked player. He's top 60 in fantasy points leagues. He's averaging 18, 7.5, and 4 with 1.5 steals. He's playing 36 minutes a night. This is a no-brainer to me. And see that 21 usage? That could become 24. Easily. This to me is a guy who might actually, for a period of time over the last 7 weeks, grimy, briefcase, haircut legend, he could roll top 40 for a period of time. I know that there's a lot of love towards a Toumani Camara, rightfully so. Grimes can do very similar things, I think, rest of season. And there is like a 15, 16 percentage point Yahoo roster differences between the two. So, yeah, I know he's playing next to Maxey and George and Embiid. For how long? So I like both Alvarado and Grimes as interesting ads. What I'm not going to do now is talk about droppable players because I could give you 100 names, right? There's so many different guys but I wanted to make that point to you of talking about your worst player, your second worst, your third worst, maybe your fourth worst. All these guys become interchangeable. And the value you get from getting 6 games in, 7 games in that roster spot versus holding one of those guys for 2, it doesn't matter if they are your 10th best guy or they're the 110th best player, because getting in 7 games versus 2 is such a big W. So I can put out a droppable list, but it's got to be more specific. I want to talk about some guys over the last 2 weeks of calendar time who are top 100 guys. And I actually just realized I forgot to put the actual ranking numbers next to them, but that's okay. I don't think how that matters a huge amount, to be honest. The number one name on this list is a name you probably haven't thought of a huge amount. Maybe you've thought of me mispronouncing it the other day and then exaggeratingly pronouncing it after that. But his name is Damian Bah. Bah plays for the Charlotte Hornets. He was on the Lakers in preseason coming out of TCU. He has, look, the numbers, you'll go, what the hell? Why is this guy 2% rostered? Because he's at 16% usage. He's the 57th ranked player per game. Yeah, 57th. Why? How has that happened? Well, there are a number of things here which are just completely fake. He's shooting 73% in his 2 games that he's played. So, come on, we know, right? 15, 2.5, and 4.5 assists with 1.5 steals and 2 threes. What he is a point guard adjacent-y type of player who will get assists, who can get some steals, who can shoot some threes. But what he has done, he has played in the games that LaMelo Ball has sat. And he is one of 3 players on 2-way contracts who all sort of play the point guard role, who cannot play in every game remaining this season, Damian Bah. It's him, it's Wendell Moore Jr., and it's KJ Simpson. And they're not really showing any sign of deciding to convert any of them to a full-time contract. So you are getting at the moment Bah in, Bah out. Bar in, bar out. And when he plays, they just go big minutes to him. And Charles Lee really does seem to like him at this stage. So I don't think that we should be looking at Damian Bah in any sort of long-term must-hold situation. But in Roto in weekly leagues, in large bench stashable formats, he won't shoot like this. But if we get a guy that, hey, ball's out, this guy might get 30 minutes, why don't I just put him in for the day? Or if something does happen in that team, they got cooked by like 60 points yesterday, there is a chance for Bart to have an interesting prolonged run. And nobody's rostering him. The next guy on this list is a starter now. For some reason, I don't really know what the reason is, but he's doing it. It is the artist formerly known as the amino acid legend, Taurean Prince. Prince has been starting over Andre Jackson Jr. And that makes him... I don't like to say it because I don't think that he's a must-roster guy, but he's in TMC. He is reliably there. And that's a compliment. Like, he could score, he can hit some threes, he occasionally gets 4 or 5 rebounds. Giannis is sort of back and forward. He's top 100 over the last 2 weeks, as you can see on this list, but he's at least in the stream zone. The next guy is another Portland center, Jabari Walker, who was great in the last game, and he's shown flashes over previous seasons too. I've already had the question, hey, is he a must-add player? No, absolutely not. But is he someone that in deeper leagues we can consider streamable? Sure. Like, top 100 is nothing to sneeze at. It happened. Those numbers occurred. But as a long-term thing, probably not. And with Rob Williams out, again, I would rather have Walker over Williams, but I would definitely rather have Klingon over Walker. And I just want to see how they develop all of this. But he's been great. Karis LeVert has as well. Now, LeVert, we know what it is with him. We know what happens. We know that we get big games, and then we get 13, 1, and 0 on 20%. And then we get 35 and 9 with 5 steals on 90%. Like, this is how he rolls. The minutes for him in Atlanta seem pretty okay. Around 28 to 32, which is good coming off the bench. Really good stuff. I do think he probably pushes above the TMC spot. He's probably in the guy you want to grab, but I don't know, man. We've been burnt so many times. And the last name there is just, I didn't expect to see this man. He wasn't quite top 100. He's like 105th. It's Obi Toppin. Largely, there was one really huge game, and some of that was without Miles Turner. He's a name that you'd never want to roster in 10 or 12s or probably 14 teamers. But when you're sitting in a situation where you go, the Pacers have got a nice little chunk of games here. They've got a nice back-to-back. Will I get 40 minutes for one ad out of Obi Toppin? Sure, you probably will. And he's had a really good run. I don't care to do much more with it, but he has had a good run. Lastly, 6 other names I want to talk about. I'm talking about the Spurs and their centers because I don't know. I don't know. I'll put Charles Bassey there. And you know what happened in this situation. I said, I think Bassey is out, so let's go with Mamakelishvili. And Sundro played 0 minutes. And I went, all right, that is a complete misfire from me. So, of course, in the next game when Bassey returned, Mamakelishvili played 21 minutes and posted a great line. But there was also a game they got cooked. They were down by like 25 to the Pistons or whatever it was, and we saw bench players popping off. I still think that Bassey, and they've shown that they would prioritize Bassey over Mamu, I still think Bassey's the guy over Biyombo and over Mamakelishvili. I'd rather have Sohan over all of them, but even him, he's like fringy to me at best. But if Bassey locks in at 26 minutes, it's Dayron Sharpish. He blocks shots, he rebounds, he scores okay, percentages can be good. He's not going to blow us all away. And we're not looking at this as league winners, of course, because that is not a thing. But I would still have Bassey over Mamu, but I can't, the logic doesn't always click with me on this one. Najee Marshall's just a name to discuss there in Dallas. They did sign the C part of Moses Brown. I know many of you want Moses Brown to be a thing because you remember him having 2020 games back in with Oklahoma City and even I think with Portland some big games. He is a dreadful real life player, and Jason Kidd has shown no issue with playing incredibly small. So Brown, I don't think he's ever playing 20 minutes to be honest. He will play his 10 or 12 minutes or so. There'll be games where he doesn't play at all. So I don't think we worry about that. But Najee Marshall just should get 26, 28. He can play some center. He can handle the ball. He's nothing close to a must-roster player. But he's in that zone of, hey, I could try this in a 12. See, I would rather have Najee over Kessler Edwards, who can't play every game due to two-way restrictions. I'd rather have Najee over Moses Brown, who's on a 10-day contract. I'd rather have Najee over, honestly, probably over Klay Thompson. That's debatable. Over Spencer Dinwiddie. Over Olivier Maxence Prosper. Najee's the guy that I would rather have there in Dallas with all those big man injuries. And it's not saying much, but he's the guy. Now, I'm going to talk about someone, and his name is Orlando Robinson, and some of you will go, what are you talking about? And that's fair, because who is Orlando Robinson? Why are we talking about Orlando Robinson? Orlando Robinson was a player, I think Fresno State he came from in college, undrafted, but his numbers at Fresno were unbelievably good. And we looked at it from a fantasy translation perspective, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. I don't know how much of this stuff is real. And he played some pretty good games for Miami. Outplayed Thomas Bryant as their backup center, and then that never really lasted. He ended up in Sacramento, didn't really play there. Went to Toronto on 10 days, and now has been converted to a two-way contract. But last game he started, Orlando Robinson. Yeah, look, he's rostered nowhere. 0%. Nowhere's rostering. And his numbers there, 16 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks, 6 and 4 with no blocks, 50% shooting in 21 minutes. Not good. He played 31 minutes last game. He had 9, 5, and 4 in that game. Do I believe that he is going to play 30 minutes every game? I honestly don't know. But they came out of the All-Star break, and they were like, right, it's Pirtle's hurt. Don't know if he's playing. I've got no idea. Pirtle's hurt. It's not Mobo we're using. It's Robinson. So there you go. If you want a short-term option, we watch and we see what is happening with the Raptors, whether they are going to, because he's on a two-way as well, so he's got limited games he can play, and whether Pirtle's available or not, we don't know. He's still questionable for Sunday's game. But just watch that they went to Robinson over Mobo, and I do believe that Pirtle will probably struggle to finish out the season, and if they preserve Robinson's games or they convert his contract at any point, he might be, because he's got an incredibly fantasy-friendly game, and he is big, I'd be just a little bit interested in that. Last three names there, one of them is Superman Kel'el Ware. Ware was unbelievably good. I had reservations about some of the stuff with Ware, because I said, look, I don't believe that taking Bam Adebayo's backup is going to be worthwhile. I'd like to see them continually play next to Bam before I get interested. Then it happened, I went, all right, we're in, we've got to add this guy. There's a lot of talent here. And then every game since then, they've just slowly peeled him back. Usage down, minutes down, everything down. And now we're seeing it where I don't know that we have to hold. I think the talent is there. But again, this is a rookie. And Spoelstra is one of the more fickle coaches in terms of rotations. How many times has Haywood Highsmith started and then got 0 minutes? He's getting 0 now. So Ware, I don't think is leaving the rotation at any point. But he's definitely not doing enough. With the arrival of Wiggins, with the change in lineup to have Davion Mitchell starting, who is somewhat of a stream guy in fantasy. Like, Ware has moved into again, at this point of the year as well. If we were in December and Ware was starting, I said, no, let's just hold and see if we can get this going back. Because if it does hit it, it's going to hit big. But it's trending down, and the longer you hold on to a sinking weight, the worse it can be in your own individual circumstance. The last two names on this list, Julian Phillips, who closed the game over Matas Buzelis last game. He's a second-round pick, early second-round pick from 2 years ago, coming out of Tennessee, incredibly young, struggled with his shot, but pretty good defensively. I've been impressed with some of the movements he's taken this season. If you're in a deeper league, I like this, with Patrick Williams out, with the Sumu out. Phillips has got to run at a regular rotation role. I don't think we're going to be looking at him as a 12-team league guy, probably not even as a stream guy necessarily, but his role is something to watch, just in case. Do they want to use him over Buzelis? They did last game, and we'll see whether they do that again. But there's just, I don't know, there's just a little sort of, little tick. I go, oh, okay, let's see where it goes. The last name there is Kel'el, because his first game for the Pelicans he started. That made no sense at all. I don't know that he'll continue to start every game. I don't know that he'll play 22 minutes a night every game. But if Kel'el gets 27 minutes, we have to be all in. Now, he is not the same player that he was. Obviously, he's older. He's not going to be that same stat-stuffing legend that we hang our hats on from. Remember that time in Houston where he was a fantasy basketball playoff legend? He's not that same guy anymore. But as soon as you hear Kel'el starting, you should immediately just go, ooh, let's watch this. Now, it wasn't good in the first game. He could easily have 10, 6, 6, 4, 2 in the next one with 3 threes. And you go, okay. And that makes it interesting. I wouldn't rush to grab because I don't think he's that same player. I don't think we've had really any indication that he is. I think the back injury has really rooted him this season. But Kel'el, starting March, it's a combination that has worked very well in the past. And that is a waiver wire show. I hope that I covered the names that you wanted me to cover. I thought I did an okay job of finding some deeper league cuts for you guys in the old double onyx, diamond, titanium, platinum, palladium leagues. I thought I covered some of the bigger names who were being added and dropped. I'm never going to cover every single player. That's impossible. But I think talking about these guys and strategies and ideas is probably the better way to go. Let me know what you think. If there's another player that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, you can drop it in the comments. And myself or one of the other members of this, not this team, because this team is me, but of this community, will can chime in and give their thoughts as well. Guys, keep the good thoughts rolling. Keep the self-reflection rolling. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.